Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So welcome back everyone to our reading of the Principles of Sufism, Qawa'id al-Tasawwuf by Sidi Ahmad Zarruq. Inshallah we'll pick up where we left off. We're on principle number 5. So remember we're still talking about the definition of things. So he says, قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. So Sidi Ahmad Zarruq rahimahullah, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. Principle number 5, referring something to its principle and supporting it with its relevant proof nullify the argument of the one who rejects its reality. So he's being very academic and very scholarly to get to the point where when we use the word Sufism or Tasawwuf more accurately, because the ism construct in English is very limiting. It makes it almost like it's another, and I know I say that because that's the way we studied it, but we should just call it tasawwuf. But anyway, when we use the word tasawwuf, as he will show us, it's something that is a known word, a properly defined word concept, and therefore it leaves no room for the detractors. That's what he's trying to establish. So when we have a word or a concept and we link it to its principle, then there's really no way that you can say, well, it's a bad word or it doesn't make any sense. So he says, furthermore, the foundation of Sufism is the station of spiritual virtue, ihsan, which the Prophet ﷺ defined as being that you should worship God as if you see Him, and if you cannot, know that He sees you. Directly taken from the hadith of Jibreel, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فهو تراه. So tasawwuf is simply the word given to that dimension of Islam. But equally we can call it ihsan, we can call it tazkiyah, we can call it fiqh al-qalb. It has different names, just like most of the Islamic sciences have multiple names. The popular name is tasawwuf. If you walked into an Islamic bookstore and you wanted books about this subject, you would say, where is the section on tasawwuf? That's where you would find it. So continuing, he says, that is because the various meanings of sincerely turning to God are based on this station and revolve around it. So in the last class, we took the principle that the definition of tasawwuf is to sincerely turn to God. Indeed, the word itself points to the quest for the vigilance required by the station. So insistence on vigilance is insistence on the essence of virtue, ihsan. Similarly, jurisprudence revolves around the station of submission, Islam, and the principle of religion around the station of faith, Iman. Sufism is one of the elements of religion which Gabriel taught the Prophet ﷺ, in order that the companions might learn it, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in. So tasawwuf is about sincerely turning to God. So he's saying, if that's the definition, what are you criticizing? Are you criticizing sincerely turning to God? That's what we're asked to do, verse after verse in the Quran, hadith after hadith, etc. Principle number 6. The technical term for something points to its definition and makes one sense its reality. The term corresponds to its content and fixes its meaning without obscurity or opposition to any judicial or customary principle. Nor must it abolish any fundamental or secondary axiom or contradict either a legal conclusion or a legal proposition. Assuming the term has been inflected and properly vowelized, there can be no ground for rejecting it. So again, when we state the concept, state the word, and we have a proper definition, it's linked to its principles, and there's no obscurity into it, now we are dealing with something known. We can't say, I don't know, this is like mumbo jumbo. He's saying that doesn't work. We're defining it in a very straightforward academic way. Therefore, and then he says, and this is kind of like the conclusion, the noun Sufism, tasawwuf, and I'm just going to keep reading it Sufism because I can't keep making the caveat about the ism. The noun Sufism or tasawwuf is of that category because it is an Arabic word that is understood, perfectly derived, non-misleading, unambiguous, and clear. Actually, its etymology gives us an idea of its meaning, just as jurisprudence does for the general rules of Islam, and exterior actions. And just as the principles of religion is theology, usul ad-din. Just as the principles of religion do for the principles of faith and the implementation of its meaning. Whatever is held to be necessary in the domains of jurisprudence and principles of faith is also necessary in tasawwuf, for they are all equal both in principle and traditional authority. So therefore, the word tasawwuf, he's saying, is a proper word. It's not like a boogeyman word. It's not like a word that comes from another language. We have no idea what it means, or it means a million things to a million people. He's like, no. As he's been saying, it's an Arabic word. He'll tell us in the next principle, the etymology, some of the popular explanations of the etymology of the word tasawwuf. And therefore, because it's about sincerely turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and because this is directly linked back to the hadith of Gabriel alayhi salam, it's just like fiqh, because our outward actions, the way we conduct our outward Islam, that also comes from the hadith of Gabriel. It's the Islam that Gabriel asked the Prophet about, salam. And our belief, in God and the angels and etc., that's our iman, that's our faith. It comes also from the text of the hadith of Gabriel. So he's saying, well, tasawwuf or ihsan in the hadith of Gabriel is the same thing when it comes to the spiritual sciences. Okay, principle number 7. Etymology requires that the meaning of the derived noun and its root be taken into consideration. The meaning of the derived word is to be perceived from the word itself. If the meanings are multiple, the perceptions are multiple. If a synthesis is possible, then it is to be made from all of them. If not, then everyone takes into account a single idea, so understand, providing the word is free of contradiction in its origin. Just as kind of like as a tangent, this is a very common approach that Muslim scholars take, where we love to combine as many things as we can. So something might have multiple definitions. So the scholar automatically is going to say, well, there must be a relationship between all of them. And kind of like, look, how do you reconcile? So the approach of reconciling what might seemingly be contradictory texts is a very normal approach of the academic study, the scholarly study of Islam. And that's kind of what he's referencing here. Many explanations have been made about the derivation of the word tasawwuf or Sufism. The explanations closest to the truth are 5. First, those who say that the term is derived from a piece of wool, a suf is wool. The reason is that the Sufi, vis-a-vis God, is like a piece of wool tossed on the ground with neither will nor direction. And the outward, robe that we wear, the jubba, it's made out of wool, it's made out of suf. And that's sort of also where the tradition, other than the fact that the Prophet ﷺ wore the jubba, but the reason that it's also made out of suf is that it's kind of like a constant reminder, of this meaning that you are like this fabric, Allah Ta'ala will do with you what He wills. So that's one origin of the word. Second, the term is derived from the lock of hair on the nape of the neck, the hair on the back here, because of its softness. The Sufi, like the lock of hair, has a soft and flexible nature vis-a-vis Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that we are to arrive at the state of accepting what Allah Ta'ala is doing to us and for us and by us and with us and all of that, rather than the constant resistance and pushing against the qadr. We're saying, okay, I am where you have placed me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The funny thing is that if we don't act like that, we're going to have a horrible time at life, if you think about it, because Allah's still going to do what Allah wants to do. So when you accept it, it makes it kind of easier. There's this beautiful hadith Qudsi. There's a lot of weakness in it, but it's a very popular hadith that preachers use. It's a hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to the human condition, and Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. I created you for my worship. خَلَقْتُكَ لِعِبَادِي فَلَا تَلْعَبْ. I created you, O human being, for my worship, so do not fool around. وَضَمَنْتُكَ وَضَمَنْتُ لَكَ رِزْقَكَ فَلَا تَتْعَبْ. And I have guaranteed your sustenance, so don't worry, don't stress over the sustenance. Not don't work, because you can understand it that way. That's like the lazy way. No, you have to work, you have to hustle. But don't worry inside, because I have guaranteed your sustenance. وَعِزَّتِي وَجَلَالِي. Allah Ta'ala swears by His awesomeness and His greatness and His majesty. Jalla wa ala. وَعِزَّتِي وَجَلَالِي. The words escape me now. But the meaning of the hadith or the rest of the tradition is that if you relied on me, if you had true tawakkul, then you would get what you are going to ordain to get, but you will get it with ease. And then Allah swears again by my majesty and by my awesomeness and my greatness. If you fool around and you don't obey my commands, I will cause you to be dragged through this world the way the animal is dragged through the mud and all of the difficulties, and still you're only going to get what I have written for you. So at the end of the day, we're only going to get what Allah Ta'ala wants us to get. So the Sufi is, one of the points of the path is to come to the realization of that truth and to be contented in the situation in which Allah Ta'ala has placed you. Okay, what's the third etymology? The term is derived from attribute, a sifa. The word sifa means attribute. That is to say that the Sufi is characterized by performing good deeds and turning away from bad qualities. Fourth, the term is derived from purity, as-safa, and Abu Fath al-Busti radiallahu anhu has confirmed this, going as far as to say, and this is like a couplet poem, but it might not hold in the English language. People have argued and differed from the term Sufi. Some think it's derived from wool. I do not grant this name save to the noble person who dealt purely with God and was purified till he was called a Sufi. And then fifth, the term is derived from the bench, as-suffa, because there was a class of the companions called Ahl as-Suffa. They used to hang out on this bench outside of the house of the Prophet ﷺ. They had dedicated themselves completely to worship and to study. So some of the people argue, some of the ulama argue that tasawwuf or Sufi comes from that class of the companions. For the Sufi has the same characteristics as the people of the bench, whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed with certain characteristics, saying of them, they call upon their Lord at morning and evening, desiring His countenance. From Surah Al-Kahf. This is the origin to which every explanation of the word goes back, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So these are the five kind of top arguments of where the word Sufi or Tasawwuf comes from and some of the stories behind it. Principle 8. In observing the rules of conduct of his predecessor, the follower is subject to the same conditions, even though the predecessor has greater preeminence. In the beginning, the people of the bench were so poor that they were known as the guests of God. Later on, the ranks were joined by rich men and princes and by those who worked for a living in the poor. They were thankful for their prosperity when it existed and were patient when it did not. Whatever state they found themselves in, they did not lose the attribute with which their Lord described them, namely, that they call upon their Lord at morning and evening, desiring His countenance. Likewise, they were not praised for the loss of their prosperity, but for seeking the face of the king, the judge. The latter is not restricted either by poverty or wealth or the sufficiency thereof. Therefore, Sufism is distinguished by neither poverty nor wealth, as long as its possessor seeks the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So understand. So he's saying that if we take the last definition, which is a pretty popular definition, or the last etymology, that Sufism or the word tasawwuf or Sufi comes from Ahl as-Suffa, we say that hopefully, inshallah, by us linking ourselves to that great group of companions, inshallah, we will take the benefit and we will be linked to their practice, even though they are going to be obviously superior to us. And then Ahl as-Suffa, when we look at them in the beginning, they were completely impoverished. They had nothing, they had no sustenance. They lived pretty much off of the generosity of the greater community. And they had dedicated themselves completely to shadowing everything that the Prophet ﷺ said and did and worship, etc. But he's saying that's not the heart of Sufism. It's not, that's just the exterior, because later people joined them in that, but they were financially, better, and they might have even been royalty and things like that. So tasawwuf is not about the material lack of resources or wealth, or even how you dress. It's the inner disposition. It's that those things don't control you, and that you are not a slave to those things. But remember, you must have things to be able to live a decent life. If you don't live a decent life and life is always difficult, it will be hard to even find the time to pray and to make dhikr and to concentrate and to learn, even do the things that we're doing. I mean, this is a luxury in the sense that we have, all of us, been able to sacrifice some time to spend with each other to go through this book. If you were, overwhelmed with the minutia of life, and you had to work 3-4 jobs just to make ends meet, you wouldn't be able to do something like this. So you have to have some sustenance. So he's reminding us that it's not about not having, but it's about not having what you own your heart and overtake you. Okay, principle number 9. The difference of relationships may be due to differing realities, or it may be due to different levels in a single reality. Accordingly, it has been said that Sufism, poverty, leading a spiritual life under apparently blameworthy circumstances and drawing near to God, belong to the first category. And it has been said that they belong to the second category, which is correct. So different levels in a single reality. The Sufi is he or she who strives to sift his time of everything but the truth. If he or she eliminates everything but the truth from themselves, then they are a person of spiritual poverty, al-faqir. So when we call each other al-fuqara, it's not a statement of, I looked at your bank statement, so therefore you're the faqir, and you looked at my bank statement, I'm the faqir. It's not about that. It's about that I am faqir, spiritually poor, vis-a-vis Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am relying completely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we all are. Aren't we all only relying on Allah? I mean, we can't do anything that Allah doesn't want us to do. So this is actually all of us, this is our reality. But the purpose of tasawwuf is that you finally realize that and you live that and you experience it. The person who leads a spiritual life under seemingly blameworthy conditions, al-malamati, I'll explain that term shortly. Amongst the two categories is he who neither manifests good nor harbors bad feeling towards anyone, like the artisans and the tradesmen who follow the path. The one who is drawn near to God, the muqarrab, is he whose spiritual states are perfect. Through his Lord, he is for the sake of his Lord. He has nothing to say about anything except the truth, nor has he any abode with whatever is other than God, so understand. In the tradition of tasawwuf, there is a group of people called the Malamatiyya, or Lamatiyya, the Malamatiyya. And these are a group of people, it's a path in which outwardly they don't look religious at all. And outwardly you would think that they are bad people, that they engage in bad works, and that's a way of camouflaging what's on the inside. This is not our way. I'll just say that. And I remember when we were talking about this, or when I first learned about this, the Shaykh said, this is not our way, nor is it permissible for you to follow that way. That our way is to find the closest attachment to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So like Amalamati I'm just making this up, but like, you might go to their house and like in the shelf behind them, there are all of these like empty like whiskey bottles or like wine bottles, that they just bought, just so it looks like that, to throw you off. They don't drink because they know drinking is haram, but they're trying to throw you off. So the Shaykh is like, we wouldn't do that, right? Because then you're going to create suspicion and so on and so forth. So there is a tradition, and it exists. Many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, a man came to the mosque, my mosque in Potomac, and he was Turkish. And he was, I think I was talking about tasawwuf or something like that, and he was, he came up to me afterwards and he was talking to me, and I realized that, it's not like your average person. He has an extra interest or knowledge of tasawwuf, and I asked him, and he said, they are malamatis, that's their order. And I thought that was really cool, and I was, please come and attend with us, and I never saw him again. So I think it still exists. I think that type of Tasawwuf still exists, but that's not our way. So that's sort of what was a reference to it, about it being different levels in a single reality, because both are trying to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, principle number 10. I'm going to try to complete this section, which is principle 10, 11, and 12, and then we'll end, inshallah. Principle 10. Because of a difference of ways, it does not follow that their goals are different. The goal may be one with different ways leading to it. Thus, religious observance, asceticism, and gnosis are ways of leading to nearness with God through spiritual grace. The three are intertwined with one another. The Gnostic must therefore observe religious rituals, for if he does not worship the object of his devotion, his knowledge is of no consequence. His observance of religious rituals may be accompanied by asceticism, for if he has not turned away from what is not he, then there is no spiritual substance in him. So we need both. You have to practice the faith. So tasawwuf is not just a thing of the heart and you don't have to practice. You have to practice the faith, and you have to be an ascetic in the sense that you have to be able to renounce or self-deny and not be consumed by the things around you. He who observes the rituals must partake of both asceticism and gnosis, for there can be no religious observance without knowledge, nor can there be any time set apart for religious observance except through asceticism. And the same holds true for asceticism, for there can be no asceticism without knowledge, nor can there be any without religious observance, otherwise it is worthless. So, to practice the faith, you have to have, by definition, some asceticism, because you're going to take off time to pray, take off time of work or whatever to make wudu. You're going to say no to food during the month of Ramadan. At the end of the year, you're going to pay some zakat. So asceticism, zuhud, in the sense that you are saying no to some worldly things because you have a spiritual obligation. Well, you can't do any of that if you don't have knowledge of what you're doing. Some people, they just want to practice the form of Islam but without the heart of Islam. And then that, as we read in last class, that's you're just bereft. You're just a corrupt, you can easily be corrupted that way. So you need all three of those things: gnosis, the ma'rifah, knowledge, the ilm, and then the practice itself. Indeed, the devotee, the abid, is the one mainly engaged in acts of devotion. The ascetic, the zahid, is the one mainly concerned with abandoning the world. The Gnostic, the arif, is the one mainly occupied in considering the dispositions of the truth. All are Sufis, and Allah Ta'ala knows best. So this is an important theme, that there are people that have different propensities. Some people, their propensity is for a lot of worship. So they're an abid, and that's their path. Some people, they have a propensity to saying no to the worldly things around them. So they're a zahid. Some people, they have a propensity for the spiritual knowledge, the gnosis. So they're an arif. But all three, all of those categories are one from the point of view that they're all just different aspects of the same reality, which is the sincerely turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tasawwuf. Principle 11. Everything has its adherents, a purpose, a place, and a reality. Sufism is suitable for whomever has true guidance, as for a Gnostic who has achieved realization, or for a sincere lover, or for a righteous seeker, or for a doctor of the law who is bound by esoteric truths, or for a jurist who is bound by the extended meanings of words. Sufism is not suitable for whomever is prejudiced by reason of his ignorance, or pretends to be knowledgeable, or speaks rashly in disputation, or is a stupid common person, or is a reluctant seeker of truth, or is a person determined to imitate blindly. The great men he has in general known, but God knows best. So anybody and everyone can follow the spiritual path if they're open. But the things that he criticized, those are all aspects of people that are closed. They are closed to learning, closed to being guidance. Oh, I have enough, I don't need this, so on and so forth. And then lastly for today, principle number 12. The nobleness of something may be due to its essence, so that is sought out only for the sake of its essence. Or it may be due to its benefit, so that it is sought out as a means of reaching that benefit. Or it may be due to something connected with it, so that the benefit is in seeking the related matter. As a result of this, it has been said, knowledge without action is a means without purpose, and action without knowledge is an offense. The intelligence is the best way to know Him, meaning Allah Ta'ala, and knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most excellent knowledge because it is the most sublime. Knowledge that is sought for its own sake is the best knowledge because its special attribute is in its essence, such as the knowledge of the reverential fear of God and of intimacy with Him and the like. Accordingly, he whose actions do not reflect his knowledge, then his knowledge acts against him, not for him. And sometimes this testifies to knowledge having left him. If his knowledge has been conditioned by his action, if only by way of perfecting his knowledge, so understand this and reflect upon it. So of course the science of tasawwuf is about sincerely turning to God. So therefore, because that's the subject of that's what we seek, and that's its essence, it means it's a noble subject, the most noble of subjects. And therefore, we seek to travel this path with the knowledge of the Sharia, its outer and its inner, so that we arrive. And then hopefully the knowledge that we gain on the inside will help rectify our actions on the outside. If it doesn't do that, then it means that there's this disconnect or incongruence between the two, and that's where oftentimes we need to reflect and have an intervention to solve that problem. Okay, that's enough for today for the class. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.